check this out.
Yeah.
Real quick. I want to show everyone this. And it probably ain't gonna fit. I'm gonna make one. I'm gonna do the short course. That just looks so badass. Turn it this way, like the front. That just looks so cool. Old style losi tires with the short course truck body. That's just gigantic. We're gonna make that work. I got a couple bodies at the house.
That'll be cool. All right.
So we're back at it again. We're kind of just, it's the weekend. We're hanging out at the hobby table, and I don't know. We discussed kind of like a podcast, kind of, I don't know, just some RC talk, some whatever. We've been doing this a while. We got back into it. We've been tinkering. It's something to do, and Jim had an interesting. We're in a process. We're going to go out and run for a little bit, and I was dialing this in. And I'm going to show you how to do this, because when we put this gear on, you see this motor, you have to mesh this up right. You got to mesh these up. I don't know if you guys can see that. You don't mesh these gears up right, you know, you're not going to go. So I was always taught, you loosen it up. Some people would put a piece of paper in through there. I don't do that. Once I tighten it up, that may not be it. I'll tighten it up. So what I do is I'll hold the gear, and then if you can just hear click just a little bit, kind of like that, that's when you're pretty good to go. You don't get that, you just between the teeth, that little chatter, then you could probably go a little more, but that's perfect for me. So we'll be able to do this. Put the tire back on. So Jim had an interesting question for me. We were talking about the frog, the old Tamiya frog, and I said, you know what, that'd be great, a great conversation. And he had some issues. He said he owned one. He had kind of a little story that he wanted to talk about. So I'm gonna put this tire on and just kind of take it away.
This has been on my mind since I was 14. So what I did is I got it for a Christmas present. I put the car together. It was great. It just didn't run fast like I was expecting it to run.
Right.
So what I did is I bought, out of a magazine, I bought a Team Associated RC10 motor. And what I didn't do anything else. I just took that motor out and put this motor in. And then the car ran horribly, very, very slow. Tried it a couple of times, and then eventually the car just.
Now this was brushed, all brushed.
Yeah.
Old school
this
brush
is like
motors.
I mean, I was 14, so
Yeah.
it was one of those things.
A while ago.
Yeah, and like the heat sink, the ceramic heat sink on the top got super, super hot, like ridiculously hot. And then after that, I tried to run it again, and it died. And I don't know what I did wrong with that car.
So we'll break it down to this. This is an old Blackfoot. The Frog was essentially the same truck, except it had a gray chassis instead of the red one.
Right.
The ones that had the red chassis were the Blackfoots and the Monster Beetles.
Okay.
Different, same truck, different bodies. These tires are actually not Blackfoot tires. They came off of a Tamiya lunchbox.
Okay.
Which is a Tamiya made. They use the same chassis almost for everything, but the lunchbox and the Midnight Pumpkin were a shorter version two-wheel drive truck, which were very squared and boxed off. Other than the Clodbuster, which was the Clod and the Bullhead, which one was a pickup truck and one was a 18-wheeler rig body.
Right.
So other than all this, and you see this is actually one of the original Tamiya servos with the stars.
Right.
So originally the way these things came set up with the brush system, and I put a brush system in this, obviously not this motor. So you had your white heat sink that went up here.
Right. It was like ceramic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But typically with the white heat sinks, back then they didn't have electronic speed controls. You had a manual one. So you had this little piece of circuitry that kind of sat down here in the middle, and you had an extra servo. So you have a steering servo that would be here,
Right.
and then I'm rebuilding this truck, by the way. This chassis is garbage. And then your throttle servo would be over here, which would run on a little arm.
Right.
So currently where my receiver is sitting is where the stock speed control would be. So essentially what it would do is it would just go back and forth.
Right, because I remember it had 2 speed controls.
And then your heat
2
sinks.
servos.
Yeah, would like be up here, and then your battery. So you put the stock engine in.
I took it out.
You took it out.
Yeah, everything was fine and it ran. I wanted to go faster. And I thought, well, I'm going to buy an RC10 motor and shove it in there. And I put it in, and it ran like half its speed.
Right.
Yep.
That could contribute to a couple things. A, turn of the motor. Are you familiar with motor turns?
No.
So I'll give you an example. They make turn motors. This is a 15, 12, 10, 8. I mean, you could probably go 1.5 turn. The more turn an engine has, let's say like this 15, 16, and 20 turn.
Right.
The more turn this on a brush side. Once they went brushless, they kind of did away with the whole turn thing, and it went to KV.
Okay.
But what turns essentially means is the more turns it has, the more torque you're going to get.
Okay.
But the slower the engine's going to go. So a happy medium with these, especially with trucks, has always been between 15 and 10. 20, I think the original Scorpion Traxxas motors were like 20 turns.
Okay.
And they weren't bad. They were slow as piss, but they did have some torque behind them. They were comparable to this. This is an HPI Firebolt, which is a 15 turn, and I'll be honest, out of all the brushed motors I've ever used in any of my applications, you'll notice everything I have that's brushed has that 15 turn HPI Firebolt in it, because I think they're better than Traxxas motors personally, and they run, they're fast, and they really do hold up. So to get back to your question why it was slower, you may have gotten an engine a motor that might not have been the same turn as the stock one.
Okay.
So another issue is batteries. Some motors pull harder than others.
I didn't change it. It was the same battery I got. It was like a whole package deal from like Price Club when that was still around, and I got it for Christmas. So everything I needed was in there. So it was like it looked like the packs that we used. They kind of looked just like wrapped in electrical tape, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You know? And there was only one battery.
Which I still have a couple of those batteries sitting around, the old style NIM batteries.
Okay, and that's what I had. So I didn't change anything. All I did was take the motor out, thinking I'm going to go faster if I get a better motor.
Yeah.
Put it in, and it just barely crawled around.
And you know, it's funny you said that, because a lot of back then they made these modified motors, dual brushed, modified, whatever.
Right.
Monster mashes and all these crazy. What they would do is to modify them, and some people would modify them at home. They would wind them tighter. The copper wire that was in them, they would wind them tighter to modify them. And the difference between those motors and something like this is the brushes in these cannot be replaced. I don't have an actual old style motor. I might have one in my junk pile, but the older, with some of those modified ones, you could replace the brushes in them, so when they'd wear out, because what happens is the contacts would get dirty, and they just wouldn't run as good as they were supposed to. So that's a weird one. The only thing I can maybe gather of that is maybe you got an engine or a motor that maybe was turned differently. Did you use the same gearing, everything?
It was all the same gears. It was just the stock car, and all I bought the same engine that was in the RC10 buggy. You know, that really cool buggy that everybody would love to have, and
the gold chassis.
Gold chassis, right? And that's exactly, I bought that motor because of that, and it just crawled along.
Did you try another motor? Did you try a different battery?
No, no, I didn't try a different battery. And then what happened was is that it just didn't run. It just stopped.
Yeah.
So I don't know what happened. I didn't know if I burned something out, like the speed control out. Would that be a problem with that?
Well, with the mechanical speed controls,
Uh-huh.
it's actually funny. I mean, I guess it's possible because the old ones, Current had to go through them,
Mhm.
and they also got dirty.
See, it was like a brand new car. Like, in other words, I didn't even run it. I didn't run it outside.
Yeah.
I put it together and I played around with it just a little bit.
Did you put the old motor back in to see if it changed?
I couldn't because it wouldn't run at all then. It was just dead.
Oh,
dead.
it just went out?
Yeah, because I panicked.
Yeah.
I went to go put the stock motor back in and nothing would work.
It sounded like the speed control maybe went bad.
Okay. But if the speed control, like in other words, should I have changed that to that motor, or did I need to put a different battery in at that time?
I think what may have happened is, batteries are done.
Ah, good.
I think what may have happened is, and it still runs true today with some applications, where certain speed controls can't handle
Right.
the draw, the amps, because anytime you're pulling battery, and it don't matter if it's an M or a LiPo battery, you can't pull draw. For instance, this is a Traxxas XL5 speed control, the number 5, 5th generation.
Right.
Now, if I were to take this motor
Yeah.
and put it on a 1st gen LX5 speed control, which is really only rated for a 20-turn motor, there's a good chance I would fry it. Because what's happening is this spins faster, it's pulling harder, and that means this has got to work more, and there's more chance for it to burn up. So maybe
It was unbelievably hot.
Yeah,
Like
well,
I was afraid it was going to melt the bottom.
yeah. So what probably happened is the motor you got was probably way hyped up.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And could not. You essentially just when you hit, even in a mechanical, when that motor turned and pulled, it just shitted everything out.
Right. Right, and that's what it did. It just stopped the car, and I tried to, like I said, I tried to put the old one back in, and nothing would move.
Now I'm sure, like even back then, with mechanical speed controls, a lot of people ran faster stuff, so they probably had different capacitors. They had to have something with the power, so it wouldn't burn up, because there was guys running speed stuff. So to think even back then, and I didn't really get into it because I was only a little kid back then, but to think even with mechanical speed controls that they didn't have modified ones that could handle a load. But if you just stuck it on a stock one and was like, hey, so by it slowing down, essentially it was burning up and closing the circuit off, and eventually just fried itself. And you had an RC car omelet at that point.
Right, yeah, it just didn't move at all. So, yeah.
No, that could be a common thing. Speed controls burn up. It's just something they do. And you know, the VXL Traxxas VXL 3s, the old school ones, are rated for 3S, and I can't tell you how many times on 3S I've burnt those speed controls up. So my theory is, and sometimes I break my rule, but if I buy whatever I buy a speed control for, like if I buy a speed control that's rated for like 6S, I don't run it past 4.
So you don't push it to its max?
I don't push it to its max.
Okay.
Because anytime you push it to its rated max, you always run a risk of possible failure. It's like I just got that speed control on that boat. It's rated for 6S, and I run 6S. But when you run that type of power consistently, now, for granted, I only take that boat out here and there. But if and there's really not too much strain on it, but if I were to take that same speed control like that, put it in a car or buggy, and run 6S in it continuously all day long, it would burn up. Heat and just overexposure, just being worked real hard. Heat is the enemy. Heat is what really burns.
Well, that's what
up.
shocked me, is how hot that one was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was ridiculously hot. But when you're saying to run the 6S, like you're running it, and are you talking about full on all the time. In other words, you don't have to go as fast as possible. You know what I mean, all the time.
No,
so like
no,
if you run not like an animal with the car or the
Yeah.
boat, that 6S wouldn't be. It wouldn't, or it does have the potential at any time.
Anytime. I mean,
really.
you can have it could blow at 4S, but I personally. And
Well, I was saying, like, if you
and-
had the 6S and you're running it
Yeah.
at like moderate speeds, not full on all the time,
yeah.
would you still run the risk of that? You still run the risk of burning it out, or not really? I mean, in other words, you know, if you're conservative with the speed, do you have?
Can
a
I ask
problem?
you a question?
Yeah.
Who puts 6S in a vehicle and that's conservative?
You got a point. I mean, because
Hey.
we go crazy. I mean, we say that we're not going to do it, and then we end up doing it. We all end up
People
going,
that run
do stupid stuff.
people that run 6S in their cars
Yeah.
are not doing it to be conservative.
Yeah.
When I put 6S in my boat and we've been out,
Yeah, I know.
I'm not conservative.
Well, the first
about
time
it.
because we were afraid to flipping it,
Yeah.
and then after we knew how stable it was, we just had at it.
4S is a happy medium.
Yeah.
But for granted, even with, 4S, I even say that gradually because that's usually the standard of what people run in heavier cars and E-Maxes and stuff.
Right.
I mean, you saw yesterday I ran 3S in that buggy,
It's ridiculous.
and it was more than enough.
Yeah.
I
It
don't
was a
need
lot of
all
fun,
that.
yeah.
And even I can't hammer that down chronically.
Right.
And it already started peeling the tires off of
Right.
it. So it's
Yeah.
just one of them things, man. I mean, yeah, it's and overuse turns the motors, whatever. It burns. It can burn things up, and things happen like that all the time.
Right.
And it could be quality of electronics, cheap versus good. But you know, at the end of the day, it could be a $50 speed control. It could be a $300 speed control. If it's a time to go,
Mhm.
it's
You're
time to
just gonna
go.
do it.
So
Gotcha.
yeah. Yeah, so that's probably exactly what happened. You just you bought a motor,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm guilty. I've
Well, I didn't know what I was doing at all. You
Getting
know what I mean?
new-
I was thinking, well, that's going to make it go faster. you know?
I still don't know everything. And when I got into doing this, and still to this day, I can't tell you how many times I've burned things up. I've blown up batteries. I mean, it wasn't until recently, until I got these new packs, I never balanced stored my batteries.
No.
Everyone's
Yeah, you
always
always
like,
said that.
store your batteries when you're done.
Mhm.
You know, I ain't stored batteries. I ran them, let them sit low for many years. Funny enough, and they still run, but
Mhm.
you got a potential of blowing them up.
Right.
But I store them. When I'm done running it now, I put them on storage charge. Give them a happy medium, so I don't have to worry about them puffing or
Right.
blowing up or anything like that. So yeah, that's probably what happened to you.
Yeah.
So
Well, at least now I know.
so now you know. It's nothing you did. You just did what the rest of us like to do.
Right.
I want to go faster.
Right.
But wait a minute.
Yeah.
We didn't have YouTube and books and stuff back then.
Right.
So there's no way to really learn. If I put a faster motor in this, it's going to go quicker. One of my first cars were one of these. This was a Rustler. I'll tell you a short story, and then we can go out and play.
Yeah.
So I got a Rustler, and I got a brushless system for it. I was so happy because I finally was getting out of the brush stuff. Like, yes, I'm gonna have something that goes fast. But I still was running my old NIM batteries. I didn't have money to get lipos yet.
Mhm.
This was almost 15, 20 years ago. So I got a Rustler, I got a brushless system, got everything dialed in, put my NIM battery in it, took it out, and all it did was chuk, 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 chuk. It clogged like this thing does.
Right.
Would not go anywhere until I like kicked it on a roll, then it started going. I thought it was the speed control and the system. I sent it back. They sent me another one, put another one in.
Right.
Same thing. Point of the story, if I would have known now what I know then, it was chugging its ass off because I had it so over geared. I had a pinion gear on that because I was like, oh, I'll put a big gear on it, I'll make it go fast. It doesn't work that way. You need, the battery needs to be able to
Right.
the speed control needs to pull out of that battery. That's why you have the C ratings. You know, it's like a tube. Goes from here to full on blown open.
Uh-huh.
30C is usually for kids, and then you get up 50, 60, 100. burst at 100, and that just gives you your punch.
Wow.
So I had it over geared, and it wasn't, you know, all these years later I realized that if I would have just put a small pinion gear on it, like a 17,
Okay.
it had ran perfectly fine.
Now that's because of the battery. Is that what you're saying? The C rating of
Well,
the battery, or what? Why?
At the point, the battery didn't even matter. I'm sure the battery hurt it, but what was hurting me more is that's like a 17 teeth. I had like a 20 on there, big fat gear, and I don't know if you know much about gear ratio in RC cars, but you know, let's say for instance, that's your spur, that's your pinion.
Right.
So typically stock standard run, that shocks a little bit. I typically don't mess with these. I keep these stock. If you want to go faster, with everything else, you can keep that the same and make this smaller, or keep that the same and make that bigger. But what happens is, again, like I'm running a 20-some tooth on that. If I take this off, put a 20 tooth gear on here, it's going to be a snail. It's just, now once it gets rolling, it'll be fast, top end.
Well, that's what you said. You actually push the car to get it to go, and then it would go, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that means that it was too tall of a gear, basically.
So
it's kind of funny that you say that, is because when I was in high school, I had a friend that had a '67 Barracuda, and he put a 430 Lincoln in it, but didn't change the gearing. So the gearings were super tall, and so when we would go out and race, you know, on weekends or something on the street, we would need 4 car lengths. No one would give us 4 car lengths because they knew what we had in the car. But it was a dog until it got to around 30 miles an hour, and then the car would almost shake itself apart. So basically that's what you're saying, is that it was too tall of a gear when you were doing it. And all you had to do is change that, you would have been okay.
It really doesn't matter at times what motor you have.
It's the gearing.
A lot of it's half of it's gearing, and the other half is your motor and your battery. It's all got to work together.
So it's got to be a balance between all three.
It's got to be a balance between all three. You got to have the proper gearing, but it depends on what you want to do with it. Some guys just want to break land speed records, so they'll put a 4S speed control in one of these guys or one of these guys with a big 4S or 6S pack in it, whatever they want, and they'll gear it to fuck's sake whatever. I mean, because what essentially they don't want it. Little gear like this, that's good to just burn out and get up to speed faster. But guys are doing speed runs, you know, once they get moving, it gradually gets up there. You know,
Speed,
you know, so
it takes a little longer.
How with these would take off and then peak out. Something with a taller gear would just, like a car, would just. It's like my pickup truck, you know, going and taking off, it's like a dog, but on the highway, once I hit those highway gears, it rolls just along. So yeah.
Cool.
So I think we're gonna, you know, we got this suspension in this, I can't get over that.
It'll be fun to take out, see what happens.
Boink, boink.
Exactly.
So yeah, we're gonna take these cars out and go have a.
Is that crooked?
Go have a little run. It's probably a little crooked. You were banging on the table, so I'm probably not in half of the shots.
Exactly.
But you know, we'll see. Let me see. I'll go over a little. There we go. But hey, even if you can't see my face, I'm sure you guys will appreciate it. Anyway, we're gonna go out. I want to make a video, kind of talk. Jim had a question. Figured, hey, you know what? Why not film it? Because I know you guys, and just like him, if you weren't sitting around watching me blabber about absolutely nothing for the next 30 minutes, what life would you really have? And if you're willing to sit and watch me run my mouth and blabber on about yada 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 for 30 minutes, I love you for it. But let's go have some fun.
Yeah.
And we'll keep you guys up to date. And Beard and Friends, always Beardy, Jimmy, we're out of here.